Welcome back to Art Practice ASMR. In this video, I experiment with watercolors and shadows while trying to recreate Dave Mazzucchelli's Batman from Batman Year One. Batman Year One is one of my favorite comics, but it's also one of the most quintessential Batman comics for understanding the character. Batman is a character who's been around for 80 years. He's had several different rewrites and reiterations in the comics. And that's not even counting all of the different movies, TV shows, cartoons, and video games that most people recognize him from. So in this video, I want to cover a little bit of Batman's history, talk about how he progressed over the years, and then talk about certain misconceptions that people have had about the character. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about The Dark Knight. Batman was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in 1939. He first appeared in Detective Comics number 27, and his story was more of a hard-boiled detective tale than the kind of sci-fi mysteries that we've come to know. Batman was a lot like the version of him that we know today, with one major exception, and that is that Batman used to carry a gun. Not just any gun, in fact, he actually used the gun that was used to murder his parents by Joe Chill. Batman not only used to carry a gun, he also used to blatantly murder people on a fairly regular basis. This continued for about a decade until they introduced a new character called Robin, and around this time period, his comics started aiming more for a younger audience. This is the Batman that a lot of people know today as Adam West era Batman, Batman 66, and he continued like this for a few decades until the 80s, when DC Comics decided that their characters were in need of a reboot. So they had an event called the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and all of their characters were given revised origins. Except for Batman. DC found that his origin still held up really well, so they just brought it into the modern era, with very few changes done to it. Unlike the original, this Batman didn't use guns, and he never wanted to kill anyone. This new Batman never intended on becoming a police officer. Instead, he trained for years outside of America to become a crime-fighting vigilante. This new Batman first appeared in Batman Year One, written by Frank Miller and illustrated by Dave Mazzucchelli. Batman Year One was shocking to people who only knew the character as a cartoony Adam West style character. Batman Year One was dark, it was intense, it was violent, but it quickly became what we know as modern Batman, and it has inspired countless versions of the character, one of which being the first movie in the acclaimed Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins. There are three things that everybody knows about Batman, and I've already mentioned two of them. Everybody knows that Batman does not kill, Batman does not use guns, and Batman is the greatest detective in the world, and he can do anything because he's Batman. But are these three things the only absolutes about the character? Do these three things make or break Batman? Well, these three things are actually a pretty common misconception about the character. A lot of people think that they are strict rules that need to be upheld by every version of the character, while other people are pretty lenient. But if we take a look at the comics, we'll know that they tell a kind of different story than the public perception. Let's start with Batman's use of guns. I've already said that he doesn't use a gun like his original counterpart, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't use guns, period. Typically, when Batman uses a gun, it's some sort of sci-fi contraption that he's built. Like the time he built a special gun and bullet that was able to kill Orion in case he started to take over traits of his father, Darkseid. Then we have the kryptonite bullet that Batman made in case Superman ever went rogue. Batman does use guns. Even in Frank Miller's own story, Dark Knight Returns, he uses a sonic gun that he built to fight Superman. So that is one absolute that people seem to know about the character that isn't always as strict as they think. Next, let's talk about Batman's no-killing rule, which, if we were talking about movies, this is something that people love to be hypocritical about. There is only one live-action Batman who hasn't killed in his movie. This Batman is George Clooney, who is often regarded as being the worst Batman. So next time you're going to hate on Ben Affleck and Batman v Superman, just keep that in mind. But since we're not talking about movies, let's talk about the comics. I'm happy to say that in his modern comics, Batman doesn't really kill anymore. However, there are two exceptions to his no-killing rule. The first is when the situation is so dire that he has no option left but to kill someone. I've mentioned the gun that he made to kill Orion, but did you know that he actually used this gun to kill Darkseid in the Final Crisis storyline? I've also mentioned the bullet that he made to kill Superman, but did you know that he had even larger plans to kill the Justice League if they ever went rogue? These plans were actually leaked and utilized by villains to torment the Justice League in a storyline called the Tower of Babel. The other exception to Batman's no-killing rule is when he succumbs to his own mental illness so badly that he no longer values his life or the lives of people around him. This most famously happens in the storyline A Lonely Place of Dying, in which Batman is so distraught by the death of Jason Todd that he tries to commit suicide just by being reckless in his nightly duties as Batman. In the beginning of this storyline, we see an encounter between Batman and the villain Ravager, in which Batman is nearly fatally wounded, but he ends up murdering Ravager by the end of this encounter. This storyline went on to inspire Batman v Superman, but nobody seems to talk about that. I guess people like complaining more than being right. Finally, let's talk about the whole world's greatest detective and because I'm Batman aspect of Batman. A lot of people believe that Batman can do anything because he's just the best. But that's not really true. Batman is written as a Randian archetypal character, in which he's a miserable genius. Just think of Rick from Rick and Morty. He believes that he can do anything he wants, and he's often written as being way too high and mighty. However, Batman isn't really as smart as he thinks he is. This is one of the things that causes Dick Grayson to hate him so much, is because Batman is just completely arrogant and too full of himself. There are many times when Batman fails just because he underestimated the whole situation. Not only that, but Batman isn't as logical as people think he is. He's often written as being very robotic in the things that he does, but Batman is a very emotional character. Just think back to the ending of Hush, in which Batman is completely paranoid and lashes out at Catwoman just because Catwoman says the words, hush. Batman can be the smartest man in the world, but often he's just an asshole. I could talk about this for hours, and I would love to in a future video, but we're reaching the end here. So I want to wish you a good night's rest. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want more, then subscribe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.